Welcome back to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. Very excited to start the new year. 2020 is going to be a rockin' new year for all of us, I'm sure. And a big part of that, I think, is tapping into what's going on in the world around us. And one of the things that is going on is there's a new book coming out. It's called Fanocracy. We have the author of Fanocracy, David Meermam Scott, here with us on Trending in Education. David is a marketing strategist, entrepreneur, and advisor to emerging companies, a VC strategic partner. He's a best-selling author of 10 books, including The New Rules of Marketing and PR. Fanocracy, which we just discussed, is due to drop like it's hot on January 7th. We're here to talk about it. David, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. And it strikes me that it's not only the beginning of a new year, it's the beginning of a new decade, which is pretty exciting too.
Exactly. Yeah. You think not just in a 1-year time horizon, it also opens up a 10-year time horizon.
I think it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, we like to make predictions. I'm hoping to make a living on predictions for the next year and a half. That's what I'm thinking. So,
Nice.
So one of those predictions, though, I think is that the next 10 years, fans are going to be a big part of everything. So I think you're onto something with this Fanocracy idea. And maybe just to start, can you tell us a little bit about Fanocracy? What does the word mean? I believe it's a neologism. I believe you have coined this word. Is that correct?
It was used a little bit here and there. So I didn't actually coin it as in I was the first person to use it. But when I came up with the word, I thought I had coined it until I found.
Yes.
But yeah, no one's ever done a book with that title. I own the URL. It's like there's just a few random, there were like a dozen random Google listings for it. So the idea of a fanocracy is when fans rule. It's the idea. It's the idea of a true human connection. And getting to your prediction thing, I've been pretty good at spotting some predictions of the last couple decades.
Yes.
So entering the 2000s, what I noticed is that marketing on the web is not about banner advertising, which is what everyone said it was back then, in 1999 or so, that transition. I said, no, it's about content. It's about publishing information. It's about all kinds of creation of content. And I was absolutely right about that. My book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR, is arguably the best-selling marketing book of that decade.
Yes.
Of the zeros.
Yes. The aughts, right? The aughts, which never quite took on. Yeah.
Exactly. 400,000 copies in English. It's in 29 languages. And then in the teens, I saw another trend. And that was the trend around real-time communications on the web. I don't know if you remember this, but Google did not index in real time until 10 years ago. If you updated a blog post or a website, Google took a whole month sometimes to surface that new content. And then about 10 years ago, they went real time. At the same time, Twitter was starting to take off, and other social networks. So I identified this idea that we are now entering an era of real-time communications.
Interesting.
And what I see us entering now is, I think that the pendulum has swung too far in the direction of superficial online communications at a time when we're really hungry for a true human connection. The whole online world has become polarizing. People are screaming fake news. There's so much tribalism. In negative related tribalism on the web, where politically and socially people are going into one group and not coming out of it. So I think we're entering an era of a kinder, gentler, more human approach to engagement, both online and offline. And so that's where the original ideas around Fanocracy birthed about 5 years ago when I was thinking about this. And I really do think that's where we're heading in this next decade of the 20s.
That's great. I mean, it's great to hear some hopefulness
Yeah.
heading into the next 10 years, because I think lots of times, maybe around the climate crisis and some of these other
Hmm.
things, that like people are very anxious and sort of like gravitate towards the negative frames around the next 10
Yes.
years. And that can be dangerous, I think, if we don't open up the possibility of where the real tremendous positivity will be. Like, even if you think about the progress that's been made around eliminating some diseases and like getting more people access to clean water, like very sort of elevating um, capabilities are emerging. And
Hmm.
I think it's very easy to sort of think about the negative frame, which obviously we do need to understand.
Yeah, well, I think so many people, when they go negative, I mean, just are incapable of understanding the other side's opinion, and
Yeah.
it becomes a zero sum game in
Hmm.
people's minds, which it
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful, truly hopeful, that with a true, genuine, more human connection, that things will emerge on the other end and be
Yeah.
much more positive going forward.
Yeah.
And I do think that the pendulum has swung too far, and
Right.
that's inevitable. That's
Right.
inevitable, that things go too far in one direction, they tend to swing back. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's nice to hear that too from someone who's made his career in marketing, to understand that. I think one of the knocks on marketing that's interesting is, it is sort of surface and lacks, maybe some depth or some substance to it. Maybe moving that into sort of the conversation of fanocracy, even the idea of a fan. I'd love you to flesh that out a little bit more, because it is a very sort of positive, like affirmational idea of fandom.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear you talk a little more about how you think, what is a fan?
So thank you. Yeah. So this idea of fandom and what I call a fanocracy was really birthed as I was thinking long and hard over the last few years about how I'm a massive fan of things.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
a huge fan of live music. I'm a huge fan of the Grateful Dead. I've been to 75 Grateful Dead concerts, 790 live shows in my life of
Yeah,
all different
just to
different
jump in real
bands.
quick, our listeners can't see this, but I can see your tie dye on underneath your buttoned up
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
shirt, and your vest too. So like, but there is, it gets cold in New England, but I'm saying I can see you have an eyewitness to a genuine Grateful Dead shirt. Not to mention there is that a Steely behind you?
Yeah, my
Yes, yes.
Grateful Dead Wall of Fame
Oh my
behind me.
goodness. Yes, yes. So we're painting a picture to our podcast listeners. Apologies. I wanted to verify your bona fides there.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, 75 Grateful Dead concerts. I actually wrote a book called Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead about 10 years ago. But I was
Hmm.
thinking about this idea of how strong this idea of fandom is for me. This idea of what I call fanocracy. And what I really came around to is it's about a true, genuine human connection, like we were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
Yes, I love going to Grateful Dead concerts. I love the music. But what I really love about it is I'm part of a tribe. I'm
Hmm.
part of a group of like minded people. I'm among my best friends because I've got a group of people who we go to shows together.
Yeah.
And in 2019, my buddies and I went to 7 Grateful Dead concerts
Wow. Yeah.
in 1 year, 3 in
Hmm.
Mexico and 4 here in the U.S.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I could go up to anybody in that audience, never met them before, and have something in common, be able to strike up a conversation instantly
Yeah.
because we're part of the same group. So
Yeah.
I was thinking about how you can apply those ideas to all kinds of different businesses, nonprofits, education,
Hmm.
all kinds of different things. And I wanted to research and see if it's possible, and it absolutely positively is. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite examples, to get at your question about marketing, comes from an organization called Haggerty Insurance. And so I love the idea of Haggerty Insurance because they've built a massive fandom around a product category that everybody hates, and that's
Hmm.
auto insurance. Everybody hates auto insurance. And when I spoke with McKeel Haggerty, the founder and CEO of Haggerty Insurance, he said, David, everyone hates my business. So I can't market like everybody else in my business. And that sort of gets at your question, Mike, about marketers and marketing. And most of marketing is around a couple of things. Number one, talking about your products and services over and over and over and over again. But
Right.
nobody really cares. The other things that marketers can sometimes do is become the low-cost provider. And say, all right, if I'm the cheapest, then I'll be able to get some business.
Right.
And then the other thing marketers do, which is, can be really annoying, is just spend more money on advertising than anybody
Right.
else.
Right.
And so what McKeel Haggerty told me, he says, David, I can't be the low cost provider. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to just talk about auto insurance because everyone hates it. So I can't do what people do there. And I don't want to spend the kind of money that my competitors who have advertisements with geckos or lizards or whatever the hell they are. I can't compete in that way either.
Right.
So what McKeel Haggerty did was he went out and expressly challenged his business to build fans. Now, what's interesting is they focus on classic car auto insurance. So they decided to specialize. And they go to over 100 classic car events a year in North America. So they're together with people who are already fans of classic cars.
Right.
And McKeel Haggerty told me I didn't have to invent the passion for classic cars. All I had to do is tap into it. And so they also have a YouTube channel with 1 million subscribers. They have a Haggerty Drivers Club with 650,000 members. And what's fascinating to me is that they've built a tribe of people who are fans of an auto insurance company, a category that everybody hates.
Right.
And they did it by creating a more human connection and not doing the traditional marketing that so many other companies are doing. They are now the largest classic car auto insurance company in the world, and they'll grow by 200,000 new customers in the coming year. And it's just a fabulous success story.
Right.
McKeel Haggerty says it's all about building fans. And I'm a fan. I have a 1973 Land Rover, which is how and Haggerty has been insuring it since 2005. That's how I learned about it.
Which side is the steering wheel on?
It's on the American side.
Okay.
It was actually an import into this country back in 1973.
Wow.
And so I'm a fan of Haggerty. I had to re-up my insurance a couple of months ago, and I was happy to pay that bill. It didn't feel like a chore. So so that's this idea of fandom, and it's tying some of the ideas around what you're a fan of because you're really passionate about it. For me, for Grateful Dead and whatnot, but also and then applying those same ideas to any business. And we've got a prescription of 10 different ways that people can build fans based on an extensive amount of research that my daughter did with me. My daughter Reiko is now 26 years old. She's my co-author on Fanocracy. And it was fun working with her because she's a millennial woman. My wife's Japanese, so my daughter's mixed race. She's a neuroscientist. She did a neuroscience degree at Columbia University and now is in her final year of medical school. So, and she's a huge Harry Potter fan, and she's a fan of going to Comic-Con. She gets dressed up and cosplays. So we have the same idea about fandom, but we come at it from an utterly different perspective. A millennial woman, versus middle-aged white guy. And so it really is interesting that these ideas apply over all kinds of different ways to grow fans that apply to all kinds of different people and different learning styles and so on.
No, I really love the intergenerational aspect of the perspective, because that's something we have talked about a bunch on this show is, research that I've read has said that, we're becoming increasingly segregated by age. So it is, I think fandom frequently is a way to cut across dimensions. I was thinking about that where, I attended my first NFL game for the Giants recently.
Nice.
And that was, I've been a lifetime fan, but I hadn't actually been to the stadium. And it just, the level of like deep catalog understanding we all had of every historic event in Giants history.
Mm.
I hadn't really felt that way. I couldn't really, aside from when I tend to go to Jazz Fest in New Orleans regularly, which is the other place that I hadn't really reflected on it until I was preparing to talk with you, David. But those are probably my biggest sort of fan things
Yeah.
really connect into. And I love that you were able to sort of identify that as something that is not to a particular identity or age or sort of insert way of grouping people, like being a fan and connecting to these sort of like deep, almost like primal rooting interests and engaging in the collective shared experience of we all care about this thing a lot.
Yes.
It's part of what it is to be human,
It is. It absolutely is. And interestingly, that was something that we really, really wanted to dig into is how this is rooted in neuroscience.
Mm-hmm.
We actually spoke with a number of neuroscientists about what's going on in the brain when you become a fan of something. And in particular, what we wanted to look at is how you relate to other people as you're engaging as a fan. So I go to a Grateful Dead concert. My daughter is talking with her friends about Harry Potter. You're going to the Giants game, right? You're with people. And it turns out that it's hardwired in our brains as a survival technique to understand of the people around us who's part of our own tribe and therefore a positive connection, and who potentially is not part of our tribe and therefore a potential enemy. Therefore, maybe we need to kick in our fight or flight mode, and that's a natural part of our brain. It's part of neuroscience tells us that. So there's one neuroscientist, his name is Edward T. Hall, identified the idea of different levels of proximity. So further than about 20 feet away is called public space, and our brains do not track people in public space. We know they're there, but we don't actively track them. Inside of 20 feet to about 4 feet is called social space, and inside of 4 feet is called personal space. And with social space, once you enter approximately 20 feet away, we begin to track people who get that close to us because we need to know, are they part of our tribe? Are they not part of our tribe? So that means if you walk into a crowded room, you can't help it. It's hardwired. Your brain begins to track those people who are in that room to understand if you know them or not. Then inside of 4 feet is cocktail party distance. If you know and trust the people who you're with at cocktail party distance, like literally at a cocktail party, that's an incredibly positive human connection, human emotions. But if you get into a crowded subway in New York City and you don't know those people, or a crowded elevator, you can't help but feel nervous because your brain is firing and saying, hey, I need to worry about these people. They're not part of my tribe. Maybe they're going to harm me. And so what does that mean for us as we're building businesses? What does it mean for us as we're teaching? What does it mean for us in the ways that we interact with other people? Well, it simply means the closer you get to someone, the more powerful the human connections. As you teach, can you get close, literally physically closer to people? As you do that. And I'll give you an example in my own world. I present at conferences all over the world. The smaller conferences might have 250 people. The bigger ones, I'm going to be speaking in about 2 weeks at Tony Robbins Business Mastery, which is 2,500 people. It's a big audience. Now, here's the interesting thing about this is that if I get in close physical proximity with some of the people in the audience, that becomes a very positive human connection with those people that I get close to. And I try to make a point I think of myself as a teacher. I am up there presenting, but I feel like I'm teaching the ideas of Fanocracy. I'm teaching the ideas of effective marketing. And so I don't just stay on the stage, which is public space further than 20 feet away. I come down into the audience. I'm together with the people in the audience. I might ask somebody a question and hand them a microphone. So I'm now in their personal space inside of 4 feet.
Right.
And I'm purposely doing that because I want to be in close physical proximity. But here's where it gets really interesting. Another aspect of neuroscience called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are the parts of our brains that fire when we see somebody do something as if we're doing it ourselves. Sometimes even just hearing somebody doing something is enough for us to have our brain fire as if we were doing that ourselves.
Yes, you hear about mirror neurons a lot when people are critical of like violent video games and sort of the influence of seeing behavior. Sort of
it does come up.
It
does come up there. Yeah, because what's happening is your brain is firing as if you're shooting that gun.
Right.
But let me demonstrate something here for you. You'll see it on video, and everyone else will hear it. But I think you might have the same experience that Mike is going to have. I'm holding a lemon and a slice of lemon in my hands. Now, if I take a bite of this lemon, it's an incredibly powerful thing going on in my brain. My eyes close instinctively and my mouth puckers up. My saliva glands are doing their things. I mean, biting into a tart lemon like this is really powerful. But just by seeing me and hearing me talk about that, Mike, you might have been feeling a little bit of lemon going on in your brain.
I mean, I hope our listeners. I got the VIP treatment because I could see David actually do this, but you could. I could actually feel the response.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And even just listening, there's some of the listeners who are feeling that lemon on the end of the tongue. That's the power of mirror neurons. So here's what this means for education, for teaching, for building fans when you're physically interacting with people. So I mentioned earlier that when I get close to people in my speeches, I might get physically close in the personal space or social space of, maybe a half dozen people during the course of my speech. But here's the thing, because of mirror neurons, other people in the audience believe I'm getting in their personal space as well, even though I'm not, because they see me do it, even if they're just seeing me do it on the video screen. And here's what it means for virtual connections. The more you can use video, where actually you and I are now speaking to one another on a video channel, the more you can use video and photographs as you virtually teach, cropped of people, of yourself, cropped as if you're in the personal space, so within 4 feet, and looking directly at the camera, our brains tell us that we actually are physically connected to you. We feel as if we're next to you physically, even though you're on a screen. This is exactly why we feel we know personally a movie star or a television star. We don't know who they are. They're just an image flickering on a screen. But we feel we know them because our brains tell us, our mirror neurons tell us, yes, you are in close physical proximity with this movie star. So this means that an effective use of video in teaching is really powerful. As well, an effective use of reaching out to people in their personal space when you're teaching, even if it's just a couple of people in that class or that situation like mine, even with 2,500 people in the audience, people's brains fire as if you're close to them. So this is just one of the 10 ideas that we talk about in the book Fanocracy to build fans. But I think this one is particularly appropriate for the subject of your podcast, Mike, and maybe some of the people listening in might be able to use some of these ideas in how they teach and how they do education.
I believe this is called proxemics, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's one of the terms that Edward T. Hall coined, although it
Yes.
never really took. People didn't really use that term.
I remember reading a bunch of Edward T. Hall. Yeah, I discovered him a long, long time ago. That's cool. It's cool when someone you were sort of, I was a fan of Edward T. Hall, and
That's
then for
cool.
you to coincidentally bring it up, super, super interesting. So, what about the dark side of fandom? Because that was kind of, we've sort of skirted around it a little bit, but like there is an element, and this is why I think live music might be a better outlet for fandom because you're less likely to get angry at people who are not fans of the show because they're not even going to be there. But like you think about something like sports or politics or religion,
Yeah,
like I think some of these same um, neurological activity can lead to sort of the anger and the polarization that we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. Any thoughts on that? I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but it does seem like there is a danger to the neuroscience that you were just talking about.
I haven't found any real danger to what I was just talking about. There are, of course, elements of dark side, negative side, as you suggest. I think that there are um, sports rivalries generally are really positive things for all sides.
Hmm.
I live in the Boston area. When the New York Yankees come to town,
Yeah,
people love to hate the Yankees,
yeah,
but they'd much rather go to a Yankees game than a game with another team.
yep,
And truth be told, almost all Boston Red Sox fans secretly like the Yankees
yeah,
because they're nearby. And so yeah, there might be a few knuckleheads that take it too far, and maybe they want to beat up somebody from the other team, but it generally is a minor thing.
yeah.
I think in the political world, it can be, especially in the more recent polarization, has just gone really. I used the word pendulum before. I do think the pendulum has swung too far
Yeah.
around the polarization in the political world in the United States recently,
Hmm.
and I think we'll probably swing back. But when two people who are good friends can't sit across the table and discuss politics because they get angry at one another, I think that's gone a little bit too far. So
Right, right.
that is an issue. And then there's also people who feel a really strong ownership over the fandoms that they love, and
Mm,
that can be a really good and healthy thing. you
right.
know when you feel as if you own the product or service or idea or book or movie or rock band that you love, that's a positive thing when it comes to fandom. And in fact, the owners of that product or service or idea, book or movie, are best thinking that once they put that product or service idea out there, that they no longer own it. It's now owned by the fans. That's a really important
Hmm.
concept to understand around building fans.
Hmm.
However, there are some fans who take that too far.
Hmm.
So there's been a backlash, for example, within Star Wars fandom, where people begin to have a negative reaction to certain Star Wars characters in the more recent movies.
Hmm.
Or for example, the original version of Ghostbusters was men,
Hmm.
and then there was a reboot of Ghostbusters a few years ago, and the stars were women.
Right.
And there were some people who had a very, very negative approach to um, that idea, that they
Right.
felt should not ever happen,
Right.
and in many ways has gone too far.
Sure.
But I actually think that those are minor things to think about. Yes, it happens.
Sure.
And yes, you need to deal with it. And if you're involved, it can be awful. If you're the actor who
Right.
portrayed one of the characters in the female version of Ghostbusters,
Sure.
it was a it was a bad part of your life when people were
Attacking you. Yeah.
were
Yeah.
attacking you.
Right. Right.
But in the end, the fans do own what
Right.
you put out there,
Yeah.
and they are going to react in the way that they're going to react. And
Right.
yes, there is some negativity, but you can't control the way that people react. I mean,
Right.
I don't remember which studio did Ghostbusters, but you can't then say, oh, you're not allowed to talk that way, because they're
Right.
the fans and that's the
Right.
way they
Right.
talk.
Yeah, and I like that. I really love that point about having to let go to really unlock the power of the fandom that you're building,
Yeah,
and really that the idea of the fanocracy is that it's ruled by the fans,
it is.
and frequently I think there's more old school. There's more of a top down sort of mindset around who are we as a brand, how do we communicate that out, and how do we keep control over our brand message. When the example of the Grateful Dead is really interesting one there, where how part of how they built that fandom is just by releasing all of that to the folks who follow it, to the point that the people who follow the Grateful Dead feel as much a sense of ownership and connection to the brand as the members of the band themselves, which I thought that was a tremendous insight. I'd love to hear you
Yeah, no,
expand on that.
that's exactly right. The Grateful Dead, unlike every other band of the era and every other band today, um, did something unique. They allowed their fans to record the concerts. You could bring professional level recording gear into the shows. They even gave you a seat if you had recording gear right behind the mixing board, which is the best place for the sound. They would give you a power strip to plug into in some cases. And they said, sure, why not? Every other band on the ticket, it says no recording allowed, no video, no audio recording allowed. The Grateful Dead said, sure, why not? And that helped to build a massive fandom. And in fact, created a social network, because the band said, the only rule we have is that you can't sell those. Initially, it was cassette tapes and later on MP3 files. Our only
Right.
rule, you can't sell those recordings.
Right.
You can trade them, you can give them away, but no selling. And so there was a big community of people who traded those tapes. So in effect, it was a social network before Mark Zuckerberg was even born.
Right.
And so the idea of letting go of your work in this way is a really powerful thing. I'll give you another example. The word Fanocracy. I own the URL. As we said earlier, I didn't coin the word, but
Right.
it's only been used a dozen or 2 dozen times that I could find on the
Sure.
internet. So
Yep.
I could very well have trademarked that name,
Yep.
and I could have owned whatever that means,
Right.
the idea of Fanocracy. Yes, I
Right.
wrote the book. Yes, I own the URL. Yes, I've talked about it now for a couple of years. I chose not to trademark it,
Right.
not to try to assert ownership over it. I specifically did that because I want other people to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I would love it if somebody else wrote a book about Fanocracy. I would love it
Mm-hmm.
if other people were doing speeches about Fanocracy. I would love it if other people wrote white papers or did blog posts about the
Mm-hmm.
idea of Fanocracy.
Yeah.
That's great, because that helps to spread the idea of what a Fanocracy is.
Yeah.
So I purposely did not try to assert my ownership over it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's pretty counterintuitive to a lot of business people who naturally want to take the legal perspective of trying to own something.
Yeah.
And in fact, some cases, it may not make sense to do that.
Yeah, it's you see this trend in a lot of different places. The movement away from command and control and
Mm-hmm.
top down structures, more towards emergent bottom up. It seems a lot of sort of the this exponential potential of the internet and the way the global community works nowadays is more fully unleashed when you let go of top down and
Yes.
command and control, and you allow things to emerge, which is super interesting. So we've established your bona fides as a seer of things that are emerging. We're sort of wrapping up towards the end of our conversation, which has been fantastic. Again, David, thank you for joining. We'd
Sure.
love to get some of your thoughts on any ways in which Fanocracy may relate to broader trends you're understanding, or ways or other trends that you're tracking independent of Fanocracy that you think will be relevant. Um, either in 2020 or like we said at the top, we got a 10-year horizon to kind of lean into a little. If you're looking into your crystal ball and you're trying to understand what's going to be different, you mentioned some positivity at the top. Any other specifics you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I've been tracking the tremendous rise of artificial intelligence, AI,
Mhm.
machine learning, and the idea of how once you begin to train a particular program or website or whatever, it begins to know who you are. And I think in some cases, there's very good aspects of that. But I also think there's can be some incredibly negative aspects of that. So, for example, Netflix, right? If you start to use Netflix, it begins to understand the sorts of things you like. Now, when I started using Netflix, for whatever reason, I was on I was binge watching rock and roll documentaries. So I think I might have watched, I don't know, a half dozen or a dozen rock and roll documentaries when I first became a subscriber to Netflix. Now the goddamn thing assumes that's the only thing I like. And everything they show me is related to that.
Mhm.
And so on one hand, it's kind of nice because it surfaces ideas for something I might like. But on the other hand, it's incredibly polarizing
Mhm.
because what it does is it says, oh, we know who you are,
Mhm.
and this is who you are, and these are the only things we're going to show you. And yes, you can get around it. You can look at other ways of trying to find Netflix shows that you might want to watch.
Right.
But I think that the rise of AI is incredibly powerful. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
the fact that on a mapping software, it can understand where you're going, how you're going to go there, what the traffic is likely to be like based on traffic from other days of the week
Yeah.
that are similar,
Right.
and even the weather. That's
Mhm.
amazing. But my prediction is sort of related to what is happening, what I mentioned earlier at the start of the show, is that as AI takes over more and more of our lives, as you go to a website and you're interacting with a robot as opposed to a person,
Right.
um, a lot of that's really powerful, but it means that the more true and genuine human connection that a company can offer,
Right.
literally person to person,
Mhm.
that will be a competitive advantage in a world of AI. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the 2020s will bring more automation, more AI, more robots, but I also think it will reward those who have a genuine connection.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me of sort of the difference between a non-zero sum game versus a zero sum game.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
so, AI will be accomplishing new and untold things, which will be wonderful on the positive side. But again, that will free up humanity to be better.
I think that's
And
right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there you go. And any thoughts how that might relate to teaching? You talked a little bit about Fanocracy and trying to get into that personal sort of intimate zone on video. Any other thoughts just around learning and education and as it relates to Fanocracy as we're wrapping up?
I've really been enjoying creating. I have some of my own online learning programs that I've worked on,
Mm,
and I like the idea of being able to do videos again cropped as if you're about 4 feet from the camera, looking directly at the camera, talking directly to the student
yep.
who's on the other side. That's incredibly powerful stuff, and I think we're
Mm-hmm.
just scratching the surface on what's possible there. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that there's going to be big opportunities for combinations of both virtual and physical learning, where the combinations are what's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a bunch of that myself, and I find it really cool. I speak at the Tony Robbins Business Mastery events every couple times a year. 2,500 people typically go. So I'm teaching from the stage, but then I offer a program where people can buy a series of videos. It's called
Mm-hmm.
New Marketing Mastery, where they can they can then have me teach them much more in depth than I can from the stage.
Yeah.
Through videos, and it's cropped in that way as if I'm
Mm.
talking directly to those people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting, just to think about even the way the virtual sort of replicates the physical, and how
Yeah,
that triggers the neuroscience behind it.
that's exactly right.
Really fascinating stuff. So as we're wrapping up, David, what's the best place for, if folks are interested in any and all of this, and hopefully they are, what's the best place or places for them to go?
So we have a great website, my daughter Reiko and I, at www.fanocracy.com. There's videos, there's infographics, PDF documents you can download, no registration, all of it free. And then on the social networks such as Twitter and others, I'm DM Scott, DMSCOTT, and I am the only David Meermam Scott in the world. So if you Google me, you will find me.
Nice. Often imitated, never duplicated. David Meermam Scott, author of Fanocracy. Wonderful guest. Definitely has my wheels turning. Hopefully our listeners' wheels are turning as we keep on trucking towards the completion of this conversation. David, really wonderful having you on the show. Thanks again for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Mike.
Awesome. And our listeners, this was a wonderful installation of Trending in Education like you're used to. We'll be back again regular time very soon. Thanks again for listening.